Hi, I'm Bench, welcome back to Doing Outdoors, and today we are in the back garden for quite a special occasion, and that is it's harvest time for the mini pop sweet corn. If you remember, in the main growing bed I'd got some normal conventional large sweet corn growing towards that side, but then all of these plants this side were mini pop corn, and they were grown from seed that I'd saved myself from last year. I also had a few plants left over which I have put next to this wall, nice south facing wall, and they've grown really well. Some of these plants, especially right next to me, have had 2 cobs per plant. Well, it's the back end of September now, and they are starting to dry on the plants. The weather's looking very wet over the next few weeks, so I think it's time that I get them in. I'm going to strip them off. They're not going to be completely dry or dry enough for us to pop just yet, but we're going to get them indoors, or at least out of the elements, so they can dry properly. But before I start picking these cobs, we'll take a closer look at these that are growing next to the wall. Bit easier for me to get the camera in, but you can see they're not massive cobs. We won't know how full they are until we get in, but I'm really pleased that they've grown as well as they have, considering that these seed I saved myself. I don't know why, but these plants in particular didn't grow any more than 1 cob per plant. The others did. But as long as they're full with corn, I'm not fussed. Right, let's see how well these have filled out. It's just like unwrapping presents at Christmas. Look at that. You know what, that's not too bad at all. That is a decent little cob. Let's hope they're all like it. Well, that one's not so good. A little bit more sporadic how that's filled out, but still got some corn for popping. That's a better one. Right, I'll go through the rest, and I'll also pick all of the cobs off the plants behind me, see how well they filled out. Well, there we go, that's all of the cobs picked off all the plants that I've grown in the garden. And you know what, that isn't a bad haul after all. There's a few that have filled out rather sporadically, but it seems that the plants that grew next to the wall, all but 1 or 2 were fully filled out. Now I put that down to when it comes to pollination, the wind has to blow the pollen from the tops of the plants and be caught by the silks on the cobs that are forming. Because it's next to the wall, there's probably greater chance that each one of the silks is going to catch some pollen. Because the plants behind me, that although they were planted in a clump, 1 or 2 were quite well filled, bigger cobs, but more than half were really sporadically filled out. So I think for next year, all the corn that I grow, or at least in the garden, I'll plant along that wall, because I get a better success rate. But that ain't too shabby really. Well, these cobs aren't quite dry enough for popping just yet, but I did take a couple of the really dry cobs off of these plants about a week ago, and they are drying in the kitchen and have been for a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. So we'll be able to pop some corn later on this evening. The kids will definitely like that. But before we go popping some corn, let's just have a bit of an update of the growing area within the back garden. It's changed quite a bit since you last saw it, and some things just didn't work out quite as I wanted them to. In particular, the purple sprouting broccoli. For some reason, it sprouted in June. It's now gone to flower. Now, I wasn't expecting that to start fruiting until after Christmas, but it's all gone. You can see the flowers, and I'm just going to leave it because these flowers are good for the bees. It's probably one of the only flowers around this late in the season. We are now 22nd of September. Next to those, we've got the Brussels plants, and as you can see, they are very few in leaves, and that's because I've had a massive problem with the cabbage white caterpillar or something similar. Absolutely ravaged all of my Brussels plants. They are starting to put out some new leaves on top, so I'm still hopeful that I'm going to get a harvest of Brussels when it comes to Christmas time. And if you remember, we had onions, shallots and garlic here. Well, I harvested all those. Wasn't a bad yield on the onions. The shallots didn't do so well, and nor did the garlic, but I put that down to me planting all of those far too late. But as soon as they came out, I then put my runner beans in. They've been performing absolutely brilliantly. And just this side of them, we have got some swede in the ground. But going back to the runner beans, we've had plenty of harvests off this row. So much so that the freezer's full of blanched runner beans, and I've decided to leave everything else that's on the plant to go dry, that we can use for seed next year. And then we come to the strawberry patch. Now, it didn't produce many strawberries this year, and I put that down to that most of these plants are rather quite old. So what I've done this year is that I've planted some of the runners on into pots, so I can dig out what plants I think are the oldest and replace some of those with these pot set runners. But what I also plan to do is take some of these strawberry plants and fill some sort of container and grow them on in one of the greenhouses up at the farm, and that is to ensure that we get an early crop of strawberries next season. And then we come to the bottom of the garden, and we have actually got some new creatures in the brooding hut. We have got 5 turkeys. Now, I was given these chicks. They were just over a day old when I got them, and they came from a friend of mine over in another village, and it was in exchange for me doing some trailer work for them to fetch some Harris fence panels, and they gave me 5 turkey chicks. They're quite old now. They're probably about 10 or 12 weeks old, fast outgrowing this pen. So in the very near future, I have got to erect a new enclosure up the farm for these turkeys to go into. They need a little bit more space, but you can see they're making some really fine birds. Looks like we've got 1 male and 4 hens. So that's got Christmas dinner sorted out, at least for me and a couple of my friends or family. Now, you may remember that I had some chickens in there previously, and they were hatched from an Indian game hen and the white rock cockerel, and it was my way of trying to produce my own fast growing meat bird. Well, those birds are now up the farm in a chicken tractor, and unfortunately the genetics aren't quite right, and they aren't a fast growing meat bird at all. They have made some really good looking birds though, so we'll keep them on for laying eggs. And there are 4 cockerels in the mix that we've got to take out soon, so we'll see just how well they will eat. Not much else to say about the garden really. Been quite a successful season, although I haven't been able to grow any carrots within the growing bed. You can see behind me I've got 2 buckets. They've got carrot seed in. and the growing medium I've used in there is simply the sieved wood chip from out of the woodland, and scattered some carrot seed on top, and both of those pots germinated really well. However, the same seed I planted in my growing bed, and whether it's the slugs, the birds, the snails, I don't know what, but I just can't get good germination. Hopefully we'll have better luck next year. In fact, before you go, there's one more thing I want to show off about. The sunflower competition that we had did well. Charlie actually won. The giant sunflowers which were at the back weren't giant at all, and in fact these that you see at the front, which are quite tall, but they are minus the heads, they were the better sunflowers. But just lately the local squirrels have been coming and chewing all the heads off and decimating the place. But I have upgraded my composting situation here at home. Before I was just running on 2 Daleks, this Dalek and that Dalek, and it just wasn't producing the best compost or giving me enough space to put all of my garden waste. So then I constructed this compost bin. It's got 2 bays. So what I did, I turned the black Dalek and the green Dalek into one half of this compost bin. Now that's given me the 2 Daleks spare again. So I've been filling them up. And you can see under my cardboard we have got some compost in the making. Now this, like I say, came out of the Dalek, so it's from this year. Hopefully when we come to springtime that will be ready to put onto the garden. And something that I really want to do next season is try and turn at least part of my growing bed into a no-dig bed, mainly because of the great success I've had already up at the farm growing in the no-dig system. I want to replicate it here where I'm already gardening. We'll just see. You need a lot of compost to set up these no-dig beds, and that's the only downside. I don't really want to purchase a load in. I'd rather make it myself. But there you go, there's the update of the garden. Let's go and pop some corn. Well, good morning. I didn't get a chance to pop any corn last night. I had to go and get a new facelift, beard trim, hair chopped. But just after these cobs have been in the house just one night, they're already feeling really hard. I think there was just a bit of moisture on them yesterday that made them feel not so good for popping. But they're looking good in that basket. But this is the corn that I took off a cob about 2 weeks ago. That's ready for popping today. And this is what I saved from last year. And it's these that grew all the plants that have grown this year, which have produced these cobs. Like I said earlier, I'm really happy that I'm growing vegetables, popcorn, from seed that I saved myself. Another thing I wanted to show you is some of the normal sweet corn that I grew. We left some of the cobs on the plants too long and they started to dry up. So I'm actually leaving them out on the side to dry. Here's some still on the cobs that are about ready to take off the cob. And I've got a bowl here full of the dry kernels. Not sure what I'm going to do with them once they're dried, but I know that I'd be able to put them into a stew or something and they will rehydrate. But what I quite fancy doing is milling them down into cornmeal to make cornbread. That's what I fancy. But you can see they're lovely and dry now, coming off the cob really easily. So if I can find a mill, I'll turn these into cornmeal, or a portion of them, and make some cornbread. Will be good. It means that these dry cobs won't go to waste. The sweet corn that we grew on these plants this year were really, really sweet, really tasty. But unfortunately I left a little too long and they started drying out. Right, so to get this turned into popcorn, all I do is I've got quite a small saucepan, about a tablespoon of oil. We've got extra virgin at the moment, but you can use any oil. Get the oil really, really hot. Might not need the lid on, but I wait until it's starting to smoke almost. And what I usually do is measure my corn with a tablespoon as well. And for a saucepan this big, I'll put probably 2 tablespoons, which is about what I have in this bowl, luckily enough. I can start to feel the heat in the bottom of the pan now. The oil isn't quite smoking, but it's running fast, which is a good sign. Well, I think that's warm enough, not quite smoking, so dump them in and then lid on. We'll give them a shake and we should start to hear them popping soon. So they're really popping now. I like to keep moving them. Until they slow down popping, when they become less frequent. Which is about now. I'll take them off the heat. And there we have some popcorn. I might have had the heat a little too high on these. Well, there we go, a bowl of fresh popcorn. And what I'm going to do, just to give this a little bit more sweetness, is I'm going to drizzle just a little bit of our honey that we produced last year also. I'm not going to go too mad, and the heat of that corn should loosen this honey and get it all spread around. And there we have it, homegrown, home popped and home sweetened popcorn. And it really does taste amazing with a bit of honey on it. Well, that's it for this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. That's amazing.